The carrot or the stick? Which provides the best results? Now let's look back in history a little quickly to see some really insightful information. If you have a look at any empire that has taken over the world, they have done it pretty much by brute force, right? They've come in, raped, pillaged, stolen, set up what they wanted to take everything. But it's not the only way they got there, right? So once they actually were there, in order to stay and hold it, they had to actually incentivize people to not rebel. And so if you think of the Great British spreading out all over the world for the British Empire, right, they also brought education, trade, infrastructure, like new ways of living that previously weren't accessible. And so the trade-off for them was worth it, right? The stick generally has much faster compliance. People will do what you want them to do much faster. But it won't stick, it won't last. It's why the British Empire has finally fallen, right? It's why the Romans fell. Every empire that took over the world has lost eventually through an uprising, or like we did, just eventually give it all back, right? And then on the other side of that, you've got the carrot. Now, this leads to a powerful intrinsic motivation. So people will want to get up and do what needs to be done. But it is dependent on let's just go back a second. So the carrot, the real nice thing about the carrot is it brings about intrinsic motivation, right? People will want to do the task that needs to be done. So it's sustainable. It will last a lot longer. But there is risk of collapse. Like I think what is happening right now in the entire world is that good times make soft people, and soft people don't want to do much, right? So let's take a look at some examples for business, right? We've got Google on one end, known for its creativity, it's thriving on motivation. It motivates people rather than sticking them in a box, right? I think it's something like 20% of Google employees' work time is allocated to creative tasks, and then some amazing things come out of it, like Gmail, and I think Google Calendar and a few other things like that is where stuff is born. And I know at Deloitte we had to do this, but it was more of on top of our work. It was called BD, business development, and you had to be working on an external project that was going to help the company as a whole, right? And then on the flip side, you've got basically Elon in every company that he's ever run, which is famous all over the news for coming in with a massive stick, a utilitarian view of what do you do? How does it drive revenue? We question, simplify, delete, delegate, accelerate, delegate. I think it's his 5-step process, something like that. But you do the process, you stay in your lane, you do nothing else, you act as a robot. And both have produced fantastic results. No one is going to question that one is better than the other for the final result. But the journey to get there might be slightly different, right? And so my conclusion on all of this is that it comes down to societal requirement. Again, you have a brief look at history. I'm not a historian by any means. I generally don't enjoy it that much. But during a wartime, we need a more authoritarian government, if that's the right word, where it's a stick. I tell you what you guys are going to do. I'm holding the stick and you do it, because hard decisions have to be made, right? And I think when you are starting out in a business, there are very strict guidelines in which work has to be done, because there's not a lot of wiggle room in terms of money. And money is cash flow, the lifeblood of a business. And there's not a lot of wiggle room for mistakes. So you have to stay in your lane and get the work that needs to be required done. So if you want to build that motivation on top of that, kind of like how Deloitte did it, that's probably the best way to go about it. But I would say that a startup is very similar to wartime government, essentially. But the funny takeaway, and I think this is the most important thing, above all, is it comes down to the skill level of the person that we're talking about. If we're talking about an individual or a team, it comes down to the skill level of the person and the skill level requirement of the task that is to be done. So there's been loads of studies, academic studies done, that show given a new skill, a new task where someone is unskilled at it, a more structured or stick-like approach yields far better outcomes, because it gives people confidence that it doesn't matter whether they know why or what they're doing, as long as they just do the steps that they're told. But as people go up the skill levels, as they move generally up the career ladder too, they find they want more autonomy to do things their way, to test and sample, and that will create a more loyal team who can actually react better to stimuli. Now, my partner and I have only ever owned businesses up to a couple of million a year, right? And even at that level, I think that's still very much startup wartime mentality, that you can't give people the freedom of kind of, this is what we want the outcome to be, go, because they don't have the skills to do it, because we are not hiring the right people who could go and build a business by themselves. Now, if you are Google, if you are Elon, you can attract people who in their own right could build £10 million businesses. And so if your company has the profitability or the funding, you can then go much further down the carrot side of things to say, guys, we're going to build something great. And this is where I think Apple landed on the sweet spot, where Steve Jobs was really well known for being a giant pain in the arse, but also a massive visionary. Like, had a real temper on him, but he'd come in with a big stick swinging. But he also built a story and building this great product, which helps motivate people to do and build the most amazing things, which is why they're one of the largest companies ever. Because I think when push came to shove, he was willing to get the stick out, smack everyone into shape and say, this is what we're doing, right? This is the path through. As a unified front, let's go. And as they're bigger and they've had more profitability, they've had the freedom to create things that other people wouldn't have been able to do in the conventional constraints. So my whole takeaway on this is a balance, unsurprisingly. I think especially for new employees or a younger business, having very strict SOPs of this is the flow and this is why. Once they have proven themselves efficient and sufficient at the job, then they may be able to alter things, or they need less monitoring and they've got more options of what they're doing, as long as the outcome's still done. And if they're doing better, fantastic, roll it out to everyone. And if they're not, you've got to reel them in. And I've definitely noticed it's far easier to start with a stick and feed carrots than start with carrots and bring the stick in later. That one hasn't worked. And in my previous experience, if you had to go to either extreme, I think the stick provides more consistent results, because carrot often allows people to waste resources because they don't have an understanding, a comprehension of what the resources are worth and what value they are bringing. And also, why would you? Like, these are employees we're talking about bringing into the company, unless you're talking about entrepreneurs and visionaries of people who would be going to do higher things by themselves, which is what these larger companies can do. That was quite a fun one to make, and hopefully giving you guys a little bit of insight into my thoughts and how I processed this carrot or stick approach and what's the best way to go forwards. So have a great day. Hopefully that's helped. And Christian, remember, strict guidelines, the higher skill the person, the more freedom they can have. That's it. Peace.